Hello, welcome to Phantom Homicide, the murder of Elizabeth Olten.
That title. Yeah, it sets a heavy tone right away. And for good reason. We're doing a deep dive today into a case that really challenges how we think about juvenile crime.
It absolutely does.
Mm.
We're looking at something that happened back in 2009 in St. Martin's, Missouri. A 9-year-old girl, Elizabeth Olten, killed by her 15-year-old neighbor, Alyssa Bustamante.
And the core of this, the thing we really need to unpack from the sources, is why. Because this wasn't, a robbery gone wrong or a sudden fight.
No, the motive.
Yeah.
It's the chilling hook here. It's what makes this case so disturbing and, frankly, rare.
The sources are quite clear. Bustamante herself confessed. She said it was about homicidal ideation. She wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone.
Just experience it.
Exactly. It falls into that terrifying category of a thrill kill. Calculated, planned, done for the experience itself.
It's a motive that feels almost alien. It forces you to ask some really tough questions, doesn't it? About, mental illness in teenagers, about warning signs, about whether anything could have stopped it.
That's what we're going to explore. We'll look at the sources detailing Elizabeth's life, Alyssa's background, which was deeply troubled.
Yeah, and the warning signs. The signs that were very public in some ways, but tragically missed or misinterpreted.
And then there's the whole legal side, how the justice system handled a premeditated murder by a minor, plus the psychological aspects, the darkness driving it all.
We really want you, listening, to grasp the convergence here. Trauma, mental health issues, that chilling premeditation, how it all came together in this one horrific act.
It's hard to even start talking about the details without first thinking about the setting.
Right.
A quiet neighborhood, supposedly safe.
Exactly. And the violation of that safety, that trust,
Yeah.
it's profound. Let's start with Elizabeth Olten herself, the victim.
Right. Elizabeth K. Olten, born December 1999. So she was just 9 years old, fourth grade.
And by all accounts, just a normal, happy kid, right? Cheerful, outgoing.
Completely. Sources describe her as vibrant, full of life, just a typical 9-year-old girl.
And living just 4 houses away from her killer.
Yeah, 4 houses. In St. Martin's, Missouri, that closeness it's key to the whole tragedy.
Because in a neighborhood like that, you feel safe. Your neighbors,
Yeah.
they're part of your world. Your kids play together.
It's supposed to be an extension of your safe space. And Elizabeth was last seen just walking home from a friend's house nearby. Familiar territory.
This wasn't a stranger abduction.
Not at all. The sources emphasize this. Elizabeth knew Alyssa Bustamante.
Knew her well, it seems.
Yeah. Alyssa was 15, older. She was friends with Elizabeth's older sister.
And had even babysat for the Oltens.
Apparently, yes, occasionally, which just adds another layer of betrayal. That familiarity, that existing trust was weaponized. It's how she was lured away.
A complete shattering of that community safety net. Okay, let's talk about Alyssa Bustamante, the perpetrator. The sources paint a really grim picture of her early life.
They do. Alyssa Daleen Bustamante, born in 1994. Her childhood was chaotic from very early on. Significant instability.
Her father, Caesar, he was in prison.
Yes, for assault charges. And her mother, Michelle, sources say she struggled very seriously with addiction.
So a really tough start, which led to...
By 2002, when Alyssa was about 8, she and her 3 younger siblings ended up in the legal custody of their maternal grandparents, Gary and Karen Brooke. They raised them in St. Martin's.
So grandparents provided stability, at least physically.
A home.
Right, a stable home environment.
Yeah.
But the psychological damage, the effects of that early trauma, that seems to have surfaced pretty intensely as she hit her teenage years.
Around age 13, things started getting really concerning.
Yeah, around 2007, friends, family, they noticed changes. Her mood, her behavior. And it wasn't just teenage angst. It culminated in something far more serious.
A suicide attempt.
Yes, which led to her being hospitalized.
Right.
Psychiatrically hospitalized.
That's a massive red flag at age 13, a critical moment, an intervention point. Absolutely critical. And looking back, this is where you start to see the potential systemic failures we'll discuss later. What happened after that hospitalization?
Was the follow-up care enough? Was it consistent?
The sources suggest probably not. There is medication like Prozac, therapy, but clearly it wasn't enough to reach the depth of the darkness she was dealing with. Maybe she wasn't taking the meds consistently. Maybe the therapy wasn't right. Or maybe the problems were just too profound.
And this wasn't all hidden, was it, this internal turmoil? She expressed some of it outwardly. online.
Oh, definitely. And this is crucial, especially thinking about 2009. Social media was taking off, but maybe adults weren't quite grasping its significance or how to monitor it effectively.
The warning signs weren't just in a private diary, they were public.
Horrifyingly public. She was known to engage in self-harm, cutting herself, which is alarming in itself.
But the online stuff went further.
Much further. On her YouTube profile, a public profile under hobbies or interests, she listed
Don't tell me.
cutting and killing people.
As hobbies. Lived it publicly. Cutting and killing people.
Side by side. It's incredibly stark. How does that not set off major alarm bells?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially for a teenager already known to be struggling, already hospitalized for a suicide attempt.
It really highlights that difficult line professionals, parents, everyone struggles with. Is it just dark teenage talk? Edgy humor?
Yeah.
Or is it a genuine expression of dangerous intent?
But combined with everything else, the trauma, the hospitalization, the self-harm.
It forms a pattern, a deeply disturbing one. And there were other things too, like a picture she posted online.
What kind of picture?
Sources mention a photo of herself, fake blood around her mouth, making a gun shape with her fingers pointed at her head.
Again, blurring that line between disturbed fantasy and something else.
Exactly. When you pile all these risk factors up, the trauma, the documented mental health crisis, the self-harm, these incredibly explicit online declarations, it paints a picture of extreme risk, even if the system, tragically, didn't seem to connect all the dots.
You wonder, back in 2009, if people just dismissed the online stuff, like, oh, kids say weird things online, not realizing it could be documentation, a window into a developing plan.
That seems to be part of the systemic breakdown, yes. The response after her hospitalization needed to be intense, coordinated. Family, school, doctors, all working together. And that digital footprint, it was another huge piece of the puzzle that somehow got missed or wasn't taken seriously enough.
An ignored cry for help. Or maybe an ignored declaration of intent.
It's hard to say definitively, but the outcome suggests the latter was closer to the truth and nobody was equipped, perhaps willing, to see it for what it was.
Okay, so we had this backdrop of instability, trauma, mental health struggles, and these really disturbing public warning signs. Now we need to look at how this internal darkness turned into, well, into a plan, a calculated, cold plan.
That's the crucial distinction here. This wasn't an impulsive act of rage. The level of premeditation is what makes it stand out, especially for someone so young.
She planned it well in advance.
The sources are chillingly specific. A full week before the murder, Alyssa Bustamante went into the woods behind her house and dug a grave. A shallow grave.
She prepared the burial spot before she even committed the act.
Yes. Which tells you this wasn't opportunistic. She had decided to kill someone and was preparing for the aftermath, even before finalizing who it would be.
And the planning.
Yeah.
It gets even darker, doesn't it? There's information about who she initially planned to kill.
There is, and this detail really underscores the thrill kill aspect. Sources confirm she didn't just dig one grave initially.
Should have dug two.
2 graves. Because her original plan, her first intended victims, were her own younger twin brothers.
Wow. Her brothers.
Yes. She planned to kill them first. Why she changed her mind? The sources don't definitively say. Maybe it was too close to home, maybe logistical difficulties, maybe a flicker of hesitation about family. We don't know. But she then shifted her focus.
To Elizabeth Olten, the little girl 4 houses down.
Exactly. It shows the victim was almost secondary. The primary goal was the act of killing itself. She had this objective, this need, apparently, to experience it, and she was just waiting for the right target, the right opportunity.
That level of detachment.
Yeah.
Planning to kill your brothers, then just switching targets. It's profoundly disturbing for a 15-year-old. It speaks to a real lack of something. Empathy.
Yeah.
Conscience.
A profound deficit, certainly. So the stage was set, the grave was ready, October 21st, 2009 arrives.
And how did she get Elizabeth to the woods?
Through deception. Calculated deception. She used her own younger sister.
Her sister? How?
She convinced her sister to bring Elizabeth over to the woods near their houses. The pretext was just hanging out, playing.
Innocent enough on the surface.
Completely. Once they got to the edge of the wooded area, Alyssa did something strategic. She somehow separated Elizabeth from her own sister, left the sister behind outside the denser woods.
And lured Elizabeth deeper in, alone.
Yes. Led her to the secluded spot where the grave was waiting.
And the attack itself. The sources say it was brutal.
Horrifically brutal. And prolonged. It wasn't quick. It started with strangulation.
Then she used a knife.
Yes. She slit Elizabeth's throat and then stabbed her repeatedly in the chest, 8 times, according to the reports.
Overwhelming violence.
After the attack, she put the body in the hole she'd dug earlier. The concealment was poor, though, just covered with leaves and some dirt. Not deep enough, not thorough enough, which is why the body was found relatively quickly, 2 days later, once the search intensified.
But the most revealing piece of evidence, the thing that gives us the clearest, most terrifying insight into her mindset at that moment, wasn't found at the crime scene.
No, it was found in her bedroom, in her personal journal.
This is where the thrill kill motive becomes undeniable, isn't it?
It's the raw, immediate documentation of her thoughts and feelings right after the murder. It's the psychological smoking gun. Forensic investigators found the journal. The entry was dated October 21st, 2009, the day of the murder.
And she tried to hide it.
She'd scribbled over it, tried to obliterate the words, but forensic analysis was able to recover the text.
And that text, I think we have to read it. It's central to understanding this. She wrote, "I just fucking killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at all. It was amazing sick. As soon as you get over the, oh my God, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kind of nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I got to go to church now." Lol.
It was amazing, pretty enjoyable. She notes the physical reaction, nervousness, shaking, but there's absolutely zero remorse, zero horror about what she'd done. Only satisfaction, accomplishment almost.
And then that ending. Okay, I got to go to church now. Lol, the disconnect is just staggering.
It's an unbelievable cognitive and emotional leap. From describing a brutal murder she found enjoyable straight to attending a church youth dance.
Which she actually did that same night.
Yes. The sources confirm she went to a dance event at her local Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that very evening, while Elizabeth Olten's family was starting to panic, realizing she was missing.
The level of compartmentalization. To commit that act, feel that way about it, and then just go to a church dance and use lol.
It points to an extreme ability to mask her internal state, to perform normalcy, and it didn't stop there.
What else?
In the 2 days that followed, while the police and the whole community were out searching frantically for Elizabeth, Alyssa Bustamante joined the search parties.
She participated in the search for the girl she killed.
Actively participated, walked alongside neighbors, friends, maybe even members of the Olten family, pretending to be concerned, pretending to help look for the child she knew was dead, buried in the woods nearby.
That takes a certain kind of coldness. A complete absence of conscience, it feels like.
It's calculated deception on an extraordinary level, which inevitably brings us to how this all unraveled.
How was she caught?
It happened quickly, thankfully. October 23rd, 2 days after the murder. The police were already looking at her, likely due to the proximity and maybe some initial interviews. But the discovery of her online posts, the YouTube profile, maybe other things that really focused the suspicion.
So the digital trail did play a role in her capture.
It seems so. Under questioning, likely confronted with her posts and maybe inconsistencies in her story, she broke down, she confessed.
And led them to the body.
Yes. She confessed to the murder and then took the authorities directly to the spot in the woods where she had buried Elizabeth Olten.
Okay, so she confesses, leads them to the body. The horror is confirmed. She's apprehended. What happens next, legally?
Yeah.
She was charged as an adult rape, despite being 15.
Immediately, yes. The nature of the crime, the premeditation, the brutality meant she was charged as an adult straight away. The initial charges were very serious.
First-degree murder.
First-degree murder, which in Missouri at the time could mean life without parole, even for a juvenile. And also armed criminal action, because she used the knife.
So, facing potentially the harshest sentence possible, she pleaded not guilty at first.
Yes, initially, in November 2009. But the evidence against her was just overwhelming. The confession, the body, the journal entry.
The journal entry alone is incredibly damning.
Absolutely. So the defense strategy really had to shift focus. It wasn't about proving innocence. It became about mitigation, trying to avoid that maximum penalty of life without parole.
Which led to a plea deal.
Exactly. In January 2012, a plea agreement was reached. This was a crucial turning point. She agreed to plead guilty, but not to first-degree murder.
They dropped it to second degree.
Yes. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and also to the armed criminal action charge.
Why was that distinction so important? Second degree versus first degree.
It was strategically vital for the defense. First-degree murder implies malice aforethought, clear premeditation with intent. Second degree, while still incredibly serious, often implies intent to harm that results in death, but perhaps without the same level of cold, calculated planning required for first degree. Or it can be used in plea deals like this. Crucially, pleading to second degree took a mandatory life without parole off the table.
Even before the big Supreme Court ruling on that.
Right. The Miller v. Alabama decision from the Supreme Court, which ruled mandatory life without parole for juveniles unconstitutional, came later in 2012. But the legal landscape was already shifting. Smart defense attorneys could see the writing on the wall, and taking first-degree LWOP off the table was paramount. This plea deal achieved that.
So she avoided the absolute certainty of dying in prison. What sentence did she ultimately receive?
Judge Patricia Joyce sentenced her. For the second-degree murder, she received life imprisonment, but with the possibility of parole.
Okay, so life, but with a chance eventually of getting out.
Theoretically, yes, but, and this is a huge but, there was the other charge, armed criminal action.
What did she get for that?
She received a sentence of 30 years. And critically, that 30-year sentence was ordered to be served consecutively to the life sentence.
Consecutive, meaning one after the other.
Precisely. So even if, hypothetically, years down the line, a parole board decides to grant her parole on the life sentence for murder, she doesn't walk free. She immediately starts serving the 30 years for armed criminal action.
That ensures a very, very long time in prison, regardless of the parole eligibility on the murder charge.
That was clearly the intent. It structured the sentence to guarantee substantial long-term incarceration. She did appeal this sentencing structure, but her appeal was denied in March 2014.
Now, the core of her defense, the mitigation argument, rested heavily on her mental state, right? Her diagnoses.
Yes, that was really their main angle, given the evidence. Multiple mental health professionals examined her and testified.
And what were the findings? What diagnoses were presented?
The key diagnoses reported in the sources were major depressive disorder, or MDD, and borderline personality disorder, BPD.
Okay. And how did the defense use those?
They argued that these conditions, combined with her incredibly traumatic childhood, the parental issues, addiction, instability, and potentially inadequate treatment following her 2007 hospitalization, all contributed to her actions. They essentially argued diminished capacity, that her illness impaired her judgment and impulse control.
They also raised questions about her medication, Prozac.
Yes, sources mentioned concerns about whether she was consistently taking her prescribed Prozac and whether the overall mental health care she received after that suicide attempt was robust enough. It was an attempt to frame her actions as a result of illness and system failure rather than pure malice.
But here's the conflict, the part that's so hard to reconcile. MDD and BPD, they usually involve intense emotional pain, self-loathing, fear of abandonment. How does that square with the journal entry, the amazing, the enjoyable, the utter lack of empathy?
That is the fundamental chilling paradox of this case. You have diagnoses typically associated with profound internal suffering and emotional dysregulation. Yet you have this documented evidence of cold calculation, planning, and apparent pleasure taken in the act of killing. The two seem almost mutually exclusive.
BPD and MDD don't typically manifest as wanting to experience killing someone for enjoyment, do they?
No, not at all. While BPD can involve impulsivity and intense anger, the calculated planning, the goal-directed nature of the killing, the specific motive confessed wanting the experience, and the documented enjoyment, that points towards something different, something more aligned with severe deficits in empathy and conscience.
Traits you might associate more with antisocial personality disorder, or even psychopathy, though that term is used cautiously with minors.
Exactly. The behaviors, the manipulation, the deception, like participating in the search, the lack of remorse, the planning, the instrumental use of violence to achieve a personal goal, the experience itself, align much more closely with characteristics of ASPD or psychopathy. But diagnosing those formally in a 15-year-old is complex and often avoided.
So the experts were left trying to fit these profoundly antisocial actions into the framework of diagnoses like BPD and MDD.
It appears that way. The defense needed to emphasize the diagnoses they had, the ones linked to emotional suffering and potential treatment failures, to build their mitigation case. Acknowledging traits closer to psychopathy would have undermined that effort significantly.
It highlights a potential gap, doesn't it? Our diagnostic systems maybe struggle to fully capture or explain this kind of extreme, cold, calculated violence in an adolescent.
It certainly poses a challenge. How much is developmental? How much is trauma? How much is underlying personality structure? And how do you weigh documented enjoyment of the act against diagnoses of emotional suffering? It's a deeply unsettling psychological puzzle.
The plea deal to second-degree murder essentially sidestepped the need for the prosecution to prove that cold, malice aforethought element required for first degree, focusing instead on the act itself and the existing mental health context.
Correct. It allowed the court to acknowledge the severity while also incorporating the mitigating factors presented by the defense, leading to that life sentence with parole, but crucially tethered to the long, consecutive sentence.
Okay, so Bustamante is sentenced, serving this very long, structured sentence. But the impact of this case didn't end there. There were other legal consequences, and the story continues even recently with parole issues.
That's right. First, there was the civil side. Understandably, Elizabeth Olten's mother, Patricia Price, pursued legal action.
A wrongful death lawsuit.
Yes, against Alyssa Bustamante. And it was successful. The court awarded a $5 million settlement.
Which, of course, Bustamante likely has no way to pay from prison.
Probably not. But the settlement included a really important provision. It requires Bustamante to disclose if she ever receives any money in the future from, say, book deals, movie rights, interviews, anything related to the case.
So she can't profit from her notoriety.
Exactly. It was a crucial measure to prevent her from ever financially benefiting from the horrific crime she committed.
We touched on the Miller v. Alabama ruling earlier, the Supreme Court decision about mandatory life without parole for juveniles. Even though her sentence wasn't mandatory LWOP, that ruling sort of provides context for how juvenile sentencing was evolving, right?
Definitely. The Miller ruling in 2012 really solidified this idea that adolescent brains are different. Less developed impulse control, more susceptibility to peer pressure, greater capacity for change and rehabilitation. The courts were being pushed to consider these factors more heavily.
So her sentence life with parole eligibility kind of fit into that evolving standard, even though the crime itself was exceptionally planned and cold for a juvenile.
It reflected that tension, acknowledging the severity, ensuring a long-term punishment via the consecutive sentence, but still leaving that theoretical door open for parole consideration far down the line, in line with the developing legal philosophy for juveniles.
But that parole eligibility recently became a huge point of controversy, didn't it? Due to a legal loophole in Missouri.
Oh, absolutely. It created a massive uproar in 2024. It's a really stark example of how broad legal reforms can have unintended and, in this case, deeply upsetting consequences.
What happened exactly? There was a new law.
Missouri passed a law, Senate Bill 26, aimed at giving some juvenile offenders a chance at earlier parole hearings. It was part of that broader juvenile justice reform movement.
Okay, seemed reasonable enough in principle.
But here's the catch. The law specifically said that individuals convicted of first-degree murder were not eligible for this earlier parole review.
And Bustamante pleaded guilty to second-degree murder.
Bingo. Because her conviction was for second degree, the law, as written, didn't exclude her. She technically qualified for this accelerated parole hearing.
Wow. So an oversight in the legislation basically opened the door for her.
A major oversight. When the public and the victim's family realized she was scheduled for a parole hearing much earlier than anyone anticipated due to this loophole, there was understandable outrage.
I can imagine. Did the state try to fix it?
They scrambled. The legislature quickly passed another bill, Senate Bill 754, specifically to close that loophole. This new bill aimed to amend the law to also exclude those convicted of second-degree murder, like Bustamante, from the early parole considerations.
So, problem solved.
Well, almost. The timing was critical. Governor Mike Parson didn't sign Senate Bill 754 into law quickly enough. It wasn't enacted before Bustamante's scheduled parole hearing date in July 2024.
You're kidding. So the hearing had to proceed, even though the legislature had clearly shown its intent to stop it.
It had to go forward under the law that was currently in effect, SB 26. It was a procedural nightmare and incredibly painful for the Olten family.
What was the outcome of that hearing?
The parole board denied her parole.
Okay, so relief for the family for now.
Yes, definitely a temporary relief. Her next parole hearing is now scheduled for 2029. But the whole episode just highlighted the intense emotions surrounding this case and the complexities of applying legal reforms retroactively, especially when loopholes appear.
And just to reiterate, even if she had been granted parole on the life sentence, she still faced that huge consecutive sentence, right?
Absolutely. That 30-year consecutive sentence for armed criminal action remains the biggest barrier to her release for a very long time.
How does the time work on that consecutive sentence? Does she have to serve all 30 years?
Not necessarily the full 30. Because of her age when convicted, Missouri law means she becomes eligible for parole consideration on that 30-year sentence after serving 15 years of it. Plus, sources indicate she might be eligible for some good time allowance, potentially reducing that 15-year requirement slightly, maybe by 15%.
So even with parole on the life sentence, she'd still have to serve roughly 13 or so years of the consecutive sentence before even being considered for release on that part.
That's the basic math, yes. Which is why, even before this 2024 parole denial, projections put her earliest possible release date, realistically, somewhere around 2059.
She'd be 65 years old.
Correct. So, despite the second-degree plea and the theoretical possibility of parole, the sentencing structure was designed for decades of incarceration.
Looking back at the whole case from the beginning, the narrative seems dominated by missed opportunities, doesn't it?
Yes.
Systemic failure.
It really does feel like a cascade of missed signals. You have the severe childhood trauma, you have the
Yeah.
documented mental health crisis at 13 leading to hospitalization, you have ongoing self-harm, and then you have these incredibly explicit online posts and journal entries talking about killing.
Any one of those should have triggered a major coordinated intervention, all of them together. It's staggering that it didn't.
The questions that linger are tough ones for the systems involved. Was the psychiatric care after 2007 truly adequate? Was it intensive enough? Was it consistent? Was there real communication and coordination between the grandparents raising her, the school she attended, and her mental health providers?
And crucially, how did everyone involved fail to recognize the genuine lethal danger expressed in her own words, even online? How do you distinguish that from, teenage drama, when it's so specific and combined with so many other red flags?
That's the hardest question, maybe. The challenge, especially back then, of filtering the noise of online expression to find the signal of real threat. But in this case, the signals were so loud, so numerous, it points to a failure to connect the dots, a failure to take the documented obsession with violence seriously enough.
It's a tragic lesson in the need for comprehensive, proactive, and coordinated care for severely troubled youth, and taking their words, especially about violence, extremely seriously.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, it's worth noting, as often happens with crimes this shocking, this case did seep into popular culture.
Right, there was a movie.
Yes, in 2012, a thriller called My Name is A by Anonymous. Sources say it was loosely based on the events of the Olten murder. Just shows the dark fascination and impact a case like this can have.
So if we try to synthesize this whole deep dive, we're looking at a horrifying act, a calculated thrill kill by a deeply troubled teenager against an innocent child she knew, whose trust she exploited.
And a killer who documented her motives and her reaction, that chilling lack of remorse, that enjoyment in her own words. It forces us to confront really difficult ideas about psychopathy, its potential roots in adolescence, and the limits of our understanding.
Which leads to that final provocative thought, right? The question that kind of hangs over this whole case.
Yeah. Given everything we know, the meticulous planning, the execution, that journal entry, does our current understanding of adolescent development and mental illness fully explain Alyssa Bustamante? Can trauma and diagnoses like DPD account for that level of cold, calculated, seemingly enjoyable violence?
Or are there some individuals, even young ones, whose path towards violence is so ingrained, so deeply rooted, perhaps due to a combination of factors we don't fully grasp, that even the best intervention systems might not be enough to prevent tragedy?
It's a disturbing question. Does developmental science cover this, or are we looking at something darker, something potentially beyond the reach of our current interventions? A question about the very nature of profound psychopathy, even when it appears so young.
A heavy thought to end on, exploring the limits of empathy and the potential for darkness. Okay, so we hope you liked our today's discussion. For more such discussions, subscribe to our channel, Phantom Homicide.